Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the greatest stories of modern history, how the personal computer was born. Taking our cues from the amazing book Fire in the Valley, we're going to see how a handful of dreamers and total hobbyists managed to change everything. So let's get into it and see how a few folks in a garage lit a fire that is, well, still burning today.
You have to love this quote. It's from the chairman of IBM, the undisputed king of computing back then, and it just perfectly captures how the establishment thought. You see, computers weren't for people. Nope, they were for governments and gigantic corporations. The idea that you'd have one in your home, that was pure science fiction.
And here's why they thought that way. I mean, just look at this thing. This is the ENIAC. It weighed 30 tons, filled an entire room, and was run by this sort of white-coated priesthood of special technicians. It was this massive, intimidating, mysterious machine, a whole world away from something you'd ever think of putting on your desk at home.
So, the revolution? It didn't start in some fancy corporate research lab. Nah, it started with kids. Kids like a 15-year-old Paul Allen and a 13-year-old Bill Gates, who were so obsessed with computers, they would literally sneak into a local company after hours just to get their hands on one. They weren't just looking for software bugs, they were dreaming up a future where a computer was something you could actually finally own. And really, this is the heart of it all. It all started with this passionate, almost impossible dream, this deep-down desire to have your very own computer. That was the emotional core that drove this entire movement.
For them, and for the few others who were like them, just getting time on a refrigerator-sized minicomputer was this incredible privilege. They knew it. They were basically hacking away on borrowed time, on somebody else's multi-million-dollar machine. But in their heads, they were already imagining what they could do if that power was truly theirs. It's gonna happen, Paul would tell Bill. And boy, was he right.
Okay, so for that dream to actually become reality, you needed more than just passion. You needed a technological spark. You needed a little bit of tinder to get that fire going.
And here it is, the great leap forward. See, computers used to be filled with these big, hot, super unreliable vacuum tubes. It was a dead end. But then came the transistor. This tiny little slice of crystal was a complete and total game changer. It was small, it was efficient, it didn't burn out, and the most important part, you could cram hundreds and then thousands of them onto a single circuit. Suddenly, making things smaller wasn't just possible, it was inevitable.
And this led directly to the microprocessor. Now, the key phrase here is general purpose. This wasn't just a chip that could do one thing, like run a calculator. No, this was the core of a computer on a chip, a single programmable brain that you could tell to do almost anything. That flexibility, that was the key to everything that was about to happen.
The story of the first microprocessor, the Intel 4004, is just fantastic. See, this Intel engineer, Ted Hoff, he was asked to design a whole set of complicated chips for a Japanese calculator company. But Hoff looked at their plan and basically thought, this is silly. Why build a complex, special-purpose device when a simpler, general-purpose one is just as easy to build? So he designed a computer on a chip instead. And even though his clients were a little skeptical at first, the microprocessor was born.
So now the technology's there. A tiny, cheap, programmable brain is available. You'd think the established computer companies, with all their money and expertise, would be perfectly positioned to just take this and run with it.
And we're talking about the titans here. IBM, the absolute king of the giant mainframe computers. DEC, the company that pioneered the smaller mini-computers. And of course, Hewlett-Packard, the Silicon Valley giant. They had every single advantage.
So the big question is, why did they all miss it? Well, the answer is a classic case of corporate blindness. They just saw no market for it. To them, computers were these really expensive, high-profit machines that they sold to other big businesses. The idea of a low-cost personal computer, it just didn't fit their business model, so they dismissed it completely.
And this story just illustrates their failure perfectly. A young engineer at HP named Stephen Wozniak, an engineer without a college degree, by the way, designed this cheap, brilliant little computer. He offered it to his bosses at HP, not once, but multiple times. They admitted it worked, but they told him flat out, this is not a product for us. That rejection, well, it would come back to haunt them in the form of a little company you might have heard of called Apple.
So this vacuum, the one left by all the sleeping giants, it was filled. It was filled by a brand new breed of innovator. The cranks, the dreamers, the hackers, and the hobbyists.
You know, their motivation wasn't just technical, it was ideological. Computer power to the people became their rallying cry. This whole idea was born out of the 60s counterculture. It was about taking this mysterious, powerful technology out of the hands of the bureaucracy and corporations and giving it to everyone. It was, at its heart, a populist movement.
And things moved so fast. I mean, incredibly fast. In 1975, you have a bunch of hobbyists getting together for the first homebrew computer club meeting. Just 1 year later, one of its members, Steve Wozniak, is showing off his Apple I. And by 1977, the first West Coast Computer Fair drew thousands of enthusiasts. It was a wildfire of grassroots innovation spreading from garage to garage all across Silicon Valley.
The result of this whole garage revolution? It was nothing less than a complete reordering of the entire technological universe.
I mean, just try to wrap your head around the scale of this transformation. It is staggering. We went from the 30-ton ENIAC in the 40s to the Intel 4004 chip in 1971, which crammed the power of thousands of transistors onto a tiny sliver of silicon. And today, the device you are holding in your hand has billions of them. It's a leap in power and miniaturization that has no parallel in human history.
And let's be crystal clear about this. There is a direct line from those kids in Seattle, from Ted Hobbs' stubborn idea at Intel, and from the hobbyists at the Homebrew Computer Club, straight to the very device you are watching this on right now. Their passion and their refusal to accept the world as it was, it literally invented our modern digital world.
Now, the era of the personal computer as the center of the universe, that may be over. But the spirit that created it, that incredible mix of idealism, technical brilliance, and a core belief that a few people in a garage can change the world, that is timeless. Which really just leaves us with one final thought. What's the next big thing being cooked up in a garage right now?